discredit it. Gates posted this picture to social media yesterday that he says shows a note from President-elect Trump calling the ethics report, quote, very unfair. The note is written on a printout of an article from last month by the conservative outlet The Federalist that says witnesses used by the House Ethics Committee were deemed uncredible by the Department of Justice. The DOJ also investigated claims against Gates, but ultimately declined to pursue charges in 2023 and then closed their probe. The DOJ declined to comment on the congressional report yesterday. Now, there was some debate within the committee about releasing the report, with committee Republican Chairman Michael Guest of Mississippi announcing in a statement that he did not vote in favor of release. Quote, while I do not challenge the committee's findings, I did not vote to support the release of the report, and I take great exception that the majority deviated from the committee's well-established standards and voted to release a report on an individual no longer under the committee's jurisdiction, meaning because Gates resigned from Congress. Meanwhile, Democratic Congressman Glenn Ivey of Maryland said yesterday that he did vote in favor and explained why in this interview.
I thought it was important to finish up the work, release the report. You know, I think the staff had done an outstanding and very thorough investigation. Given the substantial findings that we uncovered, I thought it was important to release the information for two sets of reasons. One is for guidance for current members. Even though Gates has left service in Congress, it's important for current members to know what's over the line and what isn't, but also for the public too. And I've been talking about this even when he was a nominee. I was saying then I thought this is information the Senate should see. I think this is information the public should have a chance to see as well.
NBC News has reached out to the subjects of the report, including Gates, the Trump team, and the lawyers of Gates' accusers. Now, while Matt Gaetz has said that he does not intend to return to the House seat he was reelected to in the upcoming 119th Congress, Gaetz has now hinted at a potential run for U.S. Senate.
Many have asked which perch I will be fighting from next. And some of you throughout this conference have even given me a few suggestions. My fellow Floridians have asked me to eye the governor's mansion in Tallahassee. Maybe special counsel to go after the insider trading for my former colleagues in Congress. It seems I may not have had enough support in the United States Senate. Maybe I'll just run for Marco Rubio's vacant seat in the United States Senate and join some of those folks.
Republican Senator Marco Rubio is, of course, leaving his seat in Florida after he was tapped by President-elect Trump to become Secretary of State in the upcoming administration. Joining us now, politics reporter at Semafor, Kadiyah Goma. Kadiyah, thank you so much for joining us this Christmas Eve morning. There's so much to sift through in this report for Gates. Some of the text messages that were released yesterday from Gates, from some of the women involved, are far too explicit and graphic to discuss on television. But it overall paints a really damning picture of behavior for someone who, a month or so back, Donald Trump thought was fit to serve as United States Attorney General.
Yeah, you're right. The report was quite damning, and it was kind of expected. Some of the broader pieces had leaked prior to the release of the report. It was clear that he had, was accused of having sexual misconduct with an underage woman. Those reports came out earlier, but I can't underscore what this means for the future of Matt Gaetz and how he will repair. It'll be interesting to see how he tries to repair his reputation or, as you say, discredit the findings of the Ethics Committee.
So let's dive into that a little more, Kadiyah, exactly that, because he's slated to have a show on OAN that starts in a couple of weeks. We played a clip just now. He hinted at a possible U.S. Senate run, and he's someone who does seem to still have a place of some prominence in the Trump orbit, even as an informal advisor. What are some possible paths here for someone who, let's recall, even before this report was released, was widely disliked on Capitol Hill?
Yeah, widely disliked, but I have to say that in terms of John Q. Public, he has a big presence, especially on social media. He has a very successful podcast, and as you mentioned, that is going to be. He's probably going to transition all of that to this television show. But Matt Gaetz has floated several different things. You talked about him running for Senate, possibly a gubernatorial run. I texted him yesterday. He actually, he's even floated the idea of coming into Congress specifically for the speaker's race, voting, and then leaving right after, because he, of course, as you mentioned, he did run and win for re-election for the 119th Congress. But again, I am looking at, will he be able to repair his reputation enough to have that radio show or that talk show again? That is very interesting, and I'm very curious if that is going to ruin it for him.
So, Khadija, let's turn to some of your new reporting, looking at the tumult of this last week or so there in the building behind you. Republicans struggling to unify over that continuing resolution, with 38 Republicans defying Donald Trump's wishes. We have real questions about Speaker Johnson's ability to hold on to his leadership post next year. Donald Trump's going to want to come in and hit the ground running, but there seems like there's some real fractions within his party. Tell us what you found.
Yeah, the funding debate we saw last week, I feel like, is just a mirror image of what is going to happen next year in the 119th Congress. The Republicans have a very small majority. They can only afford to lose 1 or 2 votes every time they bring something to the table. So, Speaker Johnson has to put on the floor 1 or 2 reconciliation bills. But again, he has to fund the government as well as deal with the debt limit crisis, which, again, with such a fractured, the country is split half and half. And, it's going to be difficult to rally all those Republicans and, bring this unity that they were touting a couple of weeks ago after winning the election. It's going to be very difficult, and they will need Democrats. This probably hasn't sunk in for many members of Congress, but they are going to need Democrats going into the 119th Congress.
Yeah, they're certainly going to have to. Khadija, stay with us for this one more story here. So we just learned that Ford Motor Company and General Motors will both donate cash and cars to Donald Trump's upcoming inauguration. The two companies made the announcement yesterday, pledging $1 million each, along with a fleet of vehicles, to the inauguration on January 20th. It comes as the Trump transition team has threatened tariffs, in addition to possible changes to tax credits on electric vehicles and charging stations that would likely affect both automakers. Ford and GM join other major companies like Amazon, Meta, and OpenAI, which have each pledged $1 million to fund Trump's ceremonial return to the White House. Both Ford and GM also contributed to Trump's first inauguration in 2017 and to President Biden's inauguration in 2021. So, Khadija, some of this is normal. Big companies like to get in with the new president, and the inauguration is a way to do that. But this is not a normal president. And I think that it's been eyebrows have been raised across the country about just how the efforts here to some of these business leaders are taking, the pains they're taking to cozy up to Donald Trump as he gets set to come back to office. It really shows, I'd argue, some fear on their parts as to what his policies may hold.
Yeah, you're exactly right. I think Democrats would say these companies are currying favor with the president-elect because he has announced such, drastic tariffs ahead, which will inevitably increase costs for Americans. Now, I think that is obviously interesting because, like you said, most people or most companies do this anyway. They'll contribute to the incoming president. But, this is maybe a model or a suggestion that President-elect Trump's ideas of stoking fear before he actually comes into office could actually be working. Some of his tactics, imposing when he says he's going to impose tariffs on various countries, we saw, different heads of state visiting Mar-a-Lago behind his announcement. So this could be a very smart tactic on the president-elect's part.
All right. Political reporter at Semaphore, Kadia Goba. Kadia, thank you for starting us off on this holiday. We appreciate it. Turning to some other headlines now. Former President Bill Clinton was hospitalized in Washington, D.C. yesterday after he developed a fever. A spokesperson for Clinton tells NBC News that the 78-year-old was admitted to MedStar Georgetown University Hospital for testing and observation after spiking a high fever, but that he is now in good spirits. A source close to the former president says the situation is not urgent and that Clinton is awake and alert. Of course, our best wishes to the former president and his family. Meanwhile, a man has now been charged in connection with the death of a woman who police say he intentionally set on fire inside a New York City subway car over the weekend. Officials arrested a 33-year-old man named Sebastian Zepeda, who is charged with first-degree murder and arson after he allegedly lit the woman on fire and watched her burn. According to Immigration and Customs Enforcement, Zepeda is an undocumented immigrant from Guatemala who last lived in a homeless shelter in Brooklyn. ICE officials say he was detained and deported shortly after crossing the border into Arizona in 2018, but illegally crossed the border again at an unknown time and place. New York Governor Kathy Hochul's office released a statement yesterday about the incident, saying in part this: criminals should be on notice. New York is watching you. We will catch you, and we will prosecute this crime to the fullest extent of the law. This was a horrific attack, and Governor Hochul is deeply grateful to law enforcement for catching the suspect and bringing him to justice. Still ahead here, holiday travel across the U.S. might get a little messy today, Christmas Eve, amid rain, snow, and some freezing temperatures. We'll get a check on the forecast. Plus, American Airlines passengers are seeing delays this morning after the company reported an outage. Such a busy travel day, now more complications. We'll get a live report from Chicago's O'Hare Airport with the latest on that. We're back in just 90 seconds.
Drinky poo time! Just one. I start work tomorrow.
Yes! I look so pretty. Yikes.
Erase last night's choices with Maybelline's Instant Age Rewind Concealer.
Maybe last night never even happened.
Maybe it's Maybelline.
You found it then.
Of course I did. Good boy.
If you have heart disease and struggle with LDL-C,
even with statins and diet,
listen to your heart.
Talk to your doctor about Repatha.
Repatha plus a statin lowers LDL-C by 63%. Do not take Repatha if you're allergic to it. Serious allergic reactions can occur. Get medical help right away if you have trouble breathing or swallowing, swelling of the face, lips, tongue, throat, or arms. Common side effects include runny nose, sore throat, common cold symptoms, flu or flu-like symptoms, back pain, high blood sugar, and redness, pain, or bruising at the injection site. Ask about Repatha.
Each week on my podcast, I'm joined by uniquely qualified guests who help me take a big picture look at the issues, like Representative Jasmine Crockett, late night host Seth Meyers, former Attorney General Eric Holder, and many more. Why is this happening? Listen now.
Welcome back. Some news just in. American Airlines is resuming operations after grounding all of its flights this morning due to an unspecified technical issue. Representatives from